Freedom is often mistaken for escape. But escape weakens the self. True freedom begins when the self learns to govern itself. Without mastery, freedom scatters. With mastery, it becomes power. Many seek freedom from limits. Yet only those who accept inner discipline discover what freedom truly means. In this episode, we explore Iqbal's understanding of freedom, not as absence of constraint, but as the strength to live with responsibility and awareness. True freedom does not remove structure. It gives structure meaning. Without self-mastery, freedom collapses into impulse. With self-mastery, it becomes dignity, direction, and creative power. This is the freedom that shapes destiny, rather than fleeing from it. Today, we continue our journey through Allama Khudi. This is episode 43. Settle into stillness. Allow the idea of freedom to unfold slowly. And listen, not for escape, but for the discipline that makes freedom real. Freedom is often mistaken for absence of limits. But true freedom begins where inner mastery begins. Without mastery, freedom scatters. With mastery, freedom creates. The self learns that freedom is not escape. Escape avoids responsibility. Freedom accepts it. The self understands that freedom without direction becomes confusion. Direction gives freedom shape. Shape allows movement with purpose. The self realizes that freedom grows only when desire is governed. Desire unchecked enslaves. Desire disciplined liberates. The self sees that freedom is not the removal of structure. It is the ability to move within structure without resistance. Structure gives freedom form. The self learns that freedom demands awareness. Unaware freedom destroys itself. Aware freedom refines itself. The self understands that freedom is not doing everything. It is choosing rightly. Choice guided by conscience creates dignity. The self recognizes that freedom requires courage. Courage to stand alone. Courage to reject comfort. Courage to bear consequence. The self sees that freedom matures through responsibility. Responsibility accepted expands capacity. Capacity expanded strengthens will. The self learns that freedom does not eliminate effort. It directs effort. Effort aligned feels meaningful rather than heavy. The self understands that freedom demands self-knowledge. Without knowing oneself, choice becomes impulse. Impulse imitates freedom, but produces bondage. The self realizes that freedom grows from discipline. Discipline chosen willingly becomes power. Power governed wisely creates autonomy. The self sees that freedom is internal before external. External freedom without inner freedom creates chaos. Inner freedom stabilizes action. The self learns. That freedom must be protected from desire for approval. Approval enslaves choice. Choice liberated strengthens identity. The self understands. That freedom requires courage to be misunderstood. Understanding may come later. Integrity must come first. The self recognizes. That freedom sharpens responsibility. Responsibility embraced anchors independence. Independence grounded prevents arrogance. The self sees. That freedom requires patience. Impatience seeks shortcuts. Shortcuts undermine autonomy. The self learns. That freedom deepens awareness. Awareness strengthens discernment. Discernment protects freedom. The self understands. That freedom refines motivation. Motivation purified acts without conflict. Conflict-free action sustains peace. The self realizes. That freedom carries weight. Weight accepted strengthens the self. Weight avoided weakens resolve. The self sees. That freedom matures through restraint. Restraint chosen protects dignity. Dignity affirms selfhood. The self understands. That freedom grows with responsibility. Responsibility accepted expands trust. Trust stabilizes action. The self realizes. That freedom is not rebellion. It is harmony between will and truth. Harmony empowers creation. The self sees. That freedom awakens authenticity. Authenticity aligns action and belief. Alignment strengthens identity. The self understands. That freedom deepens life. Life lived freely. Is life lived consciously? The self begins to understand. Freedom is not escape from order. It is the ability to move within it. With awareness, responsibility, and purpose. The self begins to understand. That freedom grows only where responsibility is welcomed. Responsibility rejected turns freedom into chaos. Responsibility embraced turns freedom into power. The self learns. That freedom without self-awareness is merely reaction. Reaction is shaped by impulse. Freedom requires intention. The self understands. That freedom matures through limits. Limits define direction. Direction enables meaningful movement. The self realizes. That freedom must be protected from the illusion of endless choice. Too many choices dilute purpose. Purpose clarified strengthens resolve. The self sees. That freedom is not the absence of rules. It is alignment with principles chosen consciously. The self learns. That freedom deepens when the self Takes ownership of consequences. Consequences accepted. Build maturity. Maturity sustains independence. The self understands. That freedom is tested. When sacrifice is required. Sacrifice exposes priorities. Priorities define freedom. The self recognizes. That freedom without accountability becomes self-deception. Accountability anchors growth. The self sees. That freedom demands awareness of impact. Impact considered. Prevents harm. Harm avoided preserves dignity. The self learns. That freedom matures through patience. Immediate gratification weakens will. Patience builds lasting autonomy. The self understands. That freedom is strengthened by self-restraint. Restraint refines desire. Refined desire aligns with purpose. The self realizes. That freedom thrives within boundaries. Boundaries chosen. Protect inner peace. Peace enables clarity. The self sees. That freedom is a responsibility to self. Self-respect governs action. Action governed builds integrity. The self learns. That freedom becomes meaningful when aligned with values. Values define direction. Direction gives freedom depth. The self understands. That freedom is tested by temptation. Temptation reveals strength. Strength developed sustains choice. The self realizes. That freedom requires courage. To walk alone when necessary. Solitude strengthens conviction. Conviction anchors choice. The self sees. That freedom matures through humility. Humility prevents misuse. Misuse destroys freedom. The self learns. That freedom expands through learning. Learning reveals options. Options empower decision. The self understands. That freedom depends on inner order. Inner chaos undermines liberty. Order stabilizes will. The self realizes. That freedom is not given. It is claimed responsibly. Responsibility transforms potential into reality. The self sees. That freedom deepens through self-mastery. Self-mastery prevents dependency. Dependency erodes autonomy. The self understands. That freedom is sustained by awareness. Awareness directs energy. Energy wisely directed builds enduring freedom. The self learns. That freedom grows stronger when rooted in self-knowledge. Self-knowledge illuminates choice. Choice guided strengthens identity. The self recognizes. That freedom demands discipline to protect itself. Discipline safeguards liberty. Liberty nurtured endures. The self realizes. That freedom must be practiced. Practice integrates principle. Principle embodied becomes nature. The self understands that freedom is not escape. It is engagement with life at its deepest level. There comes a moment when the self understands that freedom is not something to be gained. It is something to be lived. Lived through alignment, through awareness, through responsibility. The self realizes that freedom does not remove limits. It teaches how to move within them with dignity and clarity. The self understands that freedom grows when fear loses authority. Fear commands only when believed. Belief withdrawn returns power to the self. The self sees that freedom is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to remain whole while struggling. The self learns that freedom matures when desire is disciplined. Undisciplined desire fragments attention. Disciplined desire sharpens purpose. The self recognizes that freedom demands inner consent. No external force can impose it. It must be chosen repeatedly. The self understands that freedom carries responsibility for one's own becoming. Becoming ignored results in stagnation. Becoming embraced creates expansion. The self realizes that freedom thrives on self-trust. Self-trust dissolves fear of choice. Choice made with confidence stabilizes identity. The self sees that freedom is not license. It is alignment with truth. Truth lived liberates action. The self understands that freedom grows through accountability. Accountability embraced strengthens resolve. Resolve sustains direction. The self learns that freedom is refined through patience. Patience preserves depth. Depth enhances awareness. The self recognizes that freedom is nourished by reflection. Reflection reveals motives. Motives clarified guide intention. The self sees that freedom matures when ego softens. Ego resists responsibility. Responsibility embraced restores balance. The self understands that freedom is strengthened by choosing integrity over comfort. Comfort fades. Integrity endures. The self realizes that freedom is the courage to stand by truth, even when alone. Loneliness faced becomes strength. The self sees that freedom aligns inner and outer life. Alignment creates harmony. Harmony stabilizes being. The self understands that freedom is not rebellion. It is conscious cooperation with reality's deeper order. The self recognizes that freedom is sustained by humility. Humility keeps freedom from turning destructive. Destructive freedom collapses inward. The self learns that freedom matures through service. Service grounds autonomy. Grounded freedom endures. The self realizes that freedom requires vigilance. Neglect invites regression. Awareness preserves liberty. The self sees that freedom is not inherited. It is cultivated daily. Through conscious living, the self understands that freedom flourishes in responsibility. Responsibility gives form to liberty. Form allows expression. The self realizes that freedom is the courage to live truthfully. Truth lived becomes liberation. The self understands that freedom is not the end of struggle. It is the dignity found within it. And in that dignity, the self becomes whole.